you have to pull those chairs out?
Those pens, please. Take my little one of them. Make your notes. Yeah, it's just one pen. Two. Who you got? I honestly think
I'll be doing the park or the pool minutes. The minutes for the pool was Jeff's not here.
Who's doing the planning commission?
Huh?
Who's doing the planning commission?
I have no idea.
Chris.
Chris is.
Yeah.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. Thank you all for coming. I'd like to open the meeting for West Rockhill Township Board of Supervisors for March the 16th, 2016. So, first order of business is pledge of the flag. Would you join us, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Just a couple of procedure items. Obviously, they're probably 2 or 3 times the normal people over here, but if and when you're speaking, we would ask you to rise, cite your name and address clearly so that Judy can record it as a part of the minutes. And assuming there is interest in discussion, we're going to ask everybody to complete their discussion in 3 to 5 minutes. Greg will time it. And if it's repeating what somebody has already said, we would ask you not to repeat the same thing over again. Just indicate your interest in whatever the subject might be. So if we could follow that procedure, it'd be very helpful for us here tonight. Okay, the first thing on the agenda here is the public comments on the agenda items as listed. Yes.
Bob Rambo, Simmons Road. Don, we've just gone through a perfect storm of information. We had no fault to anyone, but we had a planning commission meeting in December, on December 8th. The following month, there was a planning commission meeting scheduled for the 12th, which normally they approve minutes.
Right.
That meeting was canceled.
Right.
The following month, February 9th, there was a planning commission meeting scheduled, and that was canceled due to snow. On March 8th, the planning commission had a meeting. They approved the minutes. It was until March 9th, from December 8th to March 9th, before the citizens had the opportunity to look at the minutes. Now again, it's a perfect storm. But it held information back, no fault to anyone, for a long period of time. I'm asking, is it possible in situations where we have this perfect storm that the minutes could be posted non-approved electronically? Because there are a lot of people who don't come to these meetings that do look at the agenda and do look at the minutes.
Yeah.
And on all the boards, planning commission, the board of supervisors, the zoning, hearing board, all these meetings, people are interested. And
I understand what you're saying. I believe there could be potentially a legal issue if the planning commission is not meeting. They're not going to approve the minutes. They're not meeting because there's no activity for that particular month. So to put the minutes unapproved in the public would be inappropriate. We don't do that for that. We don't do it for the board meetings either. They've got to be approved. Judy creates the minutes. We review them all. We either agree or ask for modifications or changes, and then once that's approved, then she's in a position and the administration's in a position to make that a public document. But until such time that's done, I don't believe legally we're in the best position to do that.
You know, Don, from a legal viewpoint, everybody gets a legal document here. There's a disclaimer on everything anymore. Okay? I don't know why the township couldn't come up with a disclaimer. We're not talking about every month doing this. We're talking about in certain situations where information needs to be disseminated. When we're looking at a situation where 99 homes were built next to an abandoned quarry, people need to know about this sooner than later. It's no one's fault. It just happens. And if we could just disseminate that information quicker to people with a legal disclaimer. We have a solicitor here. He knows how to write a disclaimer. Mary Everly knows how to write a disclaimer.
Yeah. Well,
and I just wish the board would take it under consideration.
We'll take it under consideration. We'll discuss it, and based on legal counsel, what they would recommend, and we can live with why we'll consider taking that action.
And will you get back to us next month with your decision?
Yeah, I would say we'd have a decision in 30 days.
Thank you.
You guys agree, Jim?
Yep, I agree.
Okay, thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any public comments on the agenda items? Okay, if not, we'll move into the rest of the agenda. Second item on the agenda are announcements. We will be holding an executive session following this meeting tonight to discuss personnel and real estate. Okay, gentlemen, the next item is approval of the minutes for February 17th, 2016. Have you gentlemen had the opportunity to review, comment, approve, and if so, I'd entertain a motion for approval.
I've reviewed them. I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, it's been moved and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Okay, next item on the agenda is confirmed appointment, Chris Canavan from WB Homes. Good evening, Chris.
Good evening. I have to figure out the best place to stand here. I'm assuming they're all here for me, but
Yeah, right. This might be better than this area over here. That way,
yeah.
the people in the back.
Out in the hallway waiting.
Hey, pardon?
People that are waiting.
Have them come on in. There are chairs around.
Thank you.
Clear my chair off. Thank you, sir. Very good. All right. Oh, good evening.
Good evening. Maybe before you get started, not everybody attends a lot of these meetings. We wish you would, but what I'd suggest, the understanding that you're here to present something to the board for consideration, and the board will hear what you have to say, will hear what everybody in here has to say, hopefully in a reasonable time frame, and then we will take it under consideration. We will not be making any specific decisions tonight because this is very early in the preliminary process of this, like many other developments, and as time goes on, developments can take a year to 5 years to 6 years. So it's very variable depending what the conditions are. So we're looking to hear what your views and thoughts are, and we'll record that as best we can, and that'll be part of the consideration. So with that,
Absolutely. Let me give a little
everybody
background
understands.
because I know the board's familiar with the site at least, but just to make sure everybody in the audience, I think you're all well aware of the site that we're dealing with, but I have a few slides on the screen that I think will help just frame the discussion, and then I'll talk specifically about what I'm here to talk to the board about tonight, and we can go from there. The site obviously is on Cathill Road. It's the 45-acre farm property, which is what it was known as by M&M Stone, adjacent to the old M&M Stone quarry. The site does have a PP&L power line that bisects the site basically from a north to generally south-southwest direction. The site has been through a variety of ownerships, as I think the board is well aware and many of the residents are aware. Was originally owned by the M&M Stone Company for possible expansion of the quarry. That obviously never happened. It then went into ownership by Univest Bank, who took it back due to a bank issue with the whole property. We are not buying, or nor do we have any contractual relationship with the quarry or the quarry property. I just want to make that clear. All we're looking at buying is the 2 parcels that make up the 45 acres that are shown in red here. We are the equitable owner of that property through an agreement with Real Pro LP, which has the agreement with Univest Bank. They're looking to buy the remainder of the ground. So there is some complex ownership discussions that are involved there too. But right now, we're the equitable owner, we're in our due diligence phase, and we're trying to determine if this property is developable per the SR zoning district. I do want to note that also. The property is within the West Rockhill Township suburban residential zoning district. Our proposal is in general accordance with that. There are some technical relief items which we're here to talk to the board about tonight, but it is in accordance with the existing zoning that has been on that property. The site also has another issue which I'll address with the board, and I've talked to the planning commission about. I'll call it the lower field. These 2 fields that are shown here, basically from the power lines to Cathill Road in these areas, due to an orchard that was on the site, there is some arsenic contamination on the property. The arsenic is very low level. It is higher than the statewide health standard, we are currently going through what's known as the Act 2 Land Recycling Program in order to determine a remediation effort for that area. That will come into play in my discussion as I move forward, so I did want to talk about that up front also. Judy, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide for me, please.
Go down?
Yeah, there we go. This is the plan that we have had prepared for the property. Same general layout as that red area on the aerial. This shows 99 residential units. It's a mix, per the suburban residential district ordinance, there's a requirement to have a residential mix of different types of housing types. This plan shows 40 twins, shows 42 townhomes, and shows 17 single-family homes. The single-family homes are the area at the top of the hill, which would be at the bottom of the plan. The twins basically follow the main access road through with a few backing up to the quarry property here, and the townhomes are sort of mixed in the very center of the property. The power line runs on a dog leg through the site here. From the standpoint of the arsenic I was talking about, the arsenic issue is basically, if you follow an imaginary line across the hill here, down. This field at the very top, beyond the power lines, backs up to the Drager property, has no elevated arsenic readings in it at all, and is not going to be part of the Act 2 property. So that is the background on it. The site would take access on Cathill Road. We are proposing to bring public water and sewer to the area. We have had general discussions with Drager, who owns the adjacent property out to Quarry Road, to obtain an easement to allow us to bring water and take sewer through that easement to the nearest water and sewer area up near Drager's facility. We would install a sewage facilities pump station generally down in the area of the entrance down here, so that all the sewage would drain down to that and then be pumped back up. That pump station could and would be sized to provide for availability of sewer in that area if there were other needs. I do believe there are some needs up near County Line Road that would be potential. So it will bring public facilities to that area. We will have a recreation facility in the center of the site to handle the recreation needs of the neighbors. We will maintain a buffer and a fence between our property and the quarry property. Obviously, that's a safety hazard that we would like to mitigate right up front with the nature of the property. The whole slope and stream corridor, which would be to the west of the site, if you will all be preserved as homeowners association open space, so that the woods and the hill along there would all be preserved in open space owned by the homeowners association. Then the area down near the power lines here would be open space along with the center of the site where I've mentioned the recreation facilities. That's a general overview of the property. Are there any questions with regards to at least the background information from the board?
I would have one, Chris.
Yes, Don.
Could you reiterate slowly in detail of the ownership of these properties as you know it now?
Yes. The properties legally are owned by Univest Bank. Okay.
So their name is on the deed?
Their name is on the deed. If you look on the county records, that's who owns it right now. Real Pro Enterprises LP, I believe is the name he uses, entered into an agreement of sale for the purchase of these two parcels, the quarry parcel, which is made up of 2 or 3 parcels. There's some open space along the creek on the far side here. Basically, all of the holdings that were previously owned by M&M that Univest took back, Real Pro has under agreement. Okay? We have a purchase agreement with Real Pro to buy these 2 parcels, which is the primary parcel here, plus a relatively small parcel down the bottom of the hill down here, which makes up the 45 acres that we are looking to develop and to purchase. And all of our site capacity calculations, all of the things to comply with the township zoning ordinance are only contemplating and including those 2 parcels, the 45 acres, and do not take into account any of the other parcels adjacent to it.
Okay, do you gentlemen understand, clear understanding of what he said?
I understand that, yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Now, I had a question
Yes,
also.
sir.
You discussed a buffer between your property and the quarry.
Right.
What kind of buffer are you talking about in there?
Currently on the quarry property, there is an existing berm
Okay.
that exists there. We would install a solid fence from our property line all the way up here, all the way down to the power line, since we can't fence off the power line area, so that there is a solid physical barrier from our property to that property. And then that would also be landscaped in accordance with the landscape buffer, and we can have a discussion on what exactly that would look like as we go further in the land development process.
Another question, Chris. Do you have an understanding that you can share with us relative to what any thoughts are relative to the quarry and that large body of water?
It is, and I can find, and I know that was going to be an issue, because that is obviously the, 800-pound gorilla sitting there. I do believe that the equitable owner of that property and Univest have been making investigations with PADEP about the requirements for the closure of that quarry permit and what's necessary for that. I know there is a requirement to cut the slopes back to increase basically the slope adjacent to it, so it's not as direct cliff, which you currently have in that situation right now. And that's in the process of being discussed. I don't know anything further about how far they've made it down that path. I can attempt to find that out if that's, if
That
the board
would be
would
of
ask.
value, I think,
Yeah.
for everybody to understand that.
Absolutely. Okay.
Okay, any other questions?
And one other point I
Thank you,
didn't
Denny.
bring up that I know, Don, you may have asked in a previous meeting. In conjunction with the sewer and water line that we would run out to Quarry Road, the requirement is also to put that as basically a stoned road that a truck or a vehicle can drive across. So that would also serve as a pedestrian access and an emergency access, so that although we have the single access at Cathill, we would have that as a backup access for emergency purposes. And we are designing this so that should the Drager property ever be developed in accordance with that zoning, there would be the ability to connect that in as a through road out to Quarry Road at some point down the road, so it wouldn't leave this as a cul-de-sac road forever.
That's what one of my concerns is, this way I'm looking at this, there's only one way in and one way out.
That's correct. I mean, due to the nature of the property, it's, you have very narrow frontage on the site and the slope and whatnot. We did try to design it so that once you get into the site internally, it's not a single loaded road with a cul-de-sac at the end. Once you get to this point, there are 2 points of access around to circulate through here. So really the choke point, if there were one, would be in this area here. We had some previous discussions about whether or not, if necessary, an emergency access coming down the power lines or someone in here to bring a secondary emergency access out here also would be necessary. Excuse me, to provide for, in the event of an emergency. And that's something, again, we're very, very early in the stage on this. And I apologize, I don't keep looking at you and I keep looking at the board, so I'm trying to go back and forth. As Mr. Duval mentioned, there's a lot of those planning aspects that will come in as you go through land development. Our purpose tonight, and just so the residents are clear, and the other reason we're here tonight is there are 4 technical zoning issues that we would like to address with the zoning hearing board. And as is custom, the township typically will look at an application to decide if they want to take a position on a zoning hearing board application. We have a pending application, and that's what I'm really here to determine this evening. And I can get into those to just at least get those on the table, but that's really the purpose tonight. It's not to vote on this plan, it's not to do anything more than to look at those technical aspects, which would then, if we do go to the zoning hearing board and are successful, we would then come back and go through the whole land development process, which would be an opportunity to comment on everything else that's required within the plan.
Did you have any questions?
No, that was,
The right-of-way you're talking about, is that gonna be leased land or purchased land or
It would be an easement over their
an
ground,
easement?
yes.
So that's yet to be resolved.
Oh, no, I have an easement, I have in principle, we have the terms of that agreed to. We just need to sign the legal documents for that. They were not willing to give up ground, obviously, they were looking at something that could be a development property in the future, so the easement would fall within where their setback area is, but they are willing to work with us on that.
Have you done a plan on the expected traffic load?
We have not done a traffic study yet, that would be something we would submit with our land development application per the ordinance. Again, as I said, we're in due diligence, and sometimes the information has to flow where, if this isn't going to move any further because we run into some hurdles, we try to balance how much money we spend on the due diligence costs if this isn't going to go any further. So traffic study would be something that would be submitted, though. Okay, so if I can go through, if you don't mind, I'll go through those
Please.
4 technical items.
I think it's important you do it.
Yeah. So, as I said, there are 4 technical items here. The first one I'll deal with is the zoning ordinance, as I said, requires a mix of units. And in the ordinance, there's a minimum and a maximum of different types of units you can provide. The maximum number of any type of unit type is 40%, okay? So we have 99 units, so we would have, and we have the twins that are exactly at 40%. The townhomes are at 43%, and that leaves the single-family homes at like 19%. 17%, excuse me, so my math is correct. What we're asking, what that equates to is we have 2 more townhomes and 2 less single-family homes than the ideal ordinance mix as required would be. The reason we did that is, as I mentioned, there's this line that I'm showing on the plan here that we're trying to be respective of so that the single-family homes would all sit outside of the Act 2 area and the arsenic area, and that would then, these lots would all be single-family homes, single-family ownership. They would have free access to their lots because there's no restrictions on what they could then do on their property. For the ones that are in the area that'll have the Act 2, not that there's any real restrictions on the property, but when it comes down to the uniform covenant that'll have to go on the property for environmental purposes, we'll be able to put that is the responsibility of the homeowners association. And typically the way we create the homeowners association, all of these areas, even though they're lotted out on this plan, the association would still be responsible for all of the maintenance of the property. Grass mowing, landscaping, planting trees, digging up trees, doing whatever they need to do. And then we would have that body be the one that's responsible for it. So due to the symmetry of the property, if you will, and the way it lays out, that we didn't want to put any single-family homes down in this area, thus we made that balance between there. So that's where we have the divergence from the ordinance and the 2 extra towns and the 2 less singles, which would make us then compliant with that 40-40 and 20 mix. That would be the ideal mix from the ordinance. So that's our first piece of zoning relief. I don't know if you want to comment on each of them as we go, or when you get them all on the
Well, a
table.
couple questions might help clarify it.
Sure.
Is, what are the size of the lots of the single-family homes?
The minimum size of the lots on those are 8,000 square feet, I believe, and look at my plan, I'm getting into it. I think we're averaging in that, in those lot sizes, if I can find the right section here. I'm sorry, the minimum lot's 10,000 square feet, our smallest is 10,109 square feet, and then most of them end up being bigger than that or more in the 13,000 to 14,000 square foot range due to the depth in the back of them.
So they're a quarter to 2/3
Of an acre, a quarter to a third of an acre.
And is it the intent, and maybe this is too early in the game, but is the intent that those single homes will be a part of that association?
They will be a part of the association only for common facilities that they would share, like the recreation facility and walking trails. They would be responsible unto themselves for the maintenance of their own grass, maintenance of their own snow removal, all those things. That would be their responsibility.
Okay. Any questions, Jim?
Would this still be a private road or would this become a township road?
That has, I think, been up for discussion at this point. We'd be willing to consider either option, with the idea that we have created this so it could potentially be opened out to Quarry Road, which may want it to be a public road at some point. But we are open to it to be a homeowners association road. The development is big enough to bear the cost for that.
Typically, that's the way you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's being built to township standards
Right.
with regards to
Right.
the road materials and the construction, et cetera. Okay, the second item that we would like to discuss is, if you can flip to the next slide for me. Just go down. It's the same issue for the towns and the twins, so I'll discuss it with the towns, and then twins will be the same thing. The ordinance currently requires for the townhomes that they have to sit 35 feet back from the right-of-way line. On this plan, the right-of-way line is this dark line, the one that's the closest to the cars, if you will, that runs perpendicular to the driveways. Basically, what you're seeing on this plan is a 50-foot right-of-way for the roadway, which is the long line, and that's that dark line. You then have your a 2-foot grass strip, a 4-foot sidewalk, a 5-foot grass strip and curb, and then the 28-foot wide roadway. what we're asking for so that we can move the units closer to the road and decrease overall impervious is instead of being 35 feet to be 25 feet from the right-of-way line. That would reduce on the townhomes the impervious per townhome lot of 180 square feet, and for the twins, it would reduce it by about 270 square feet of impervious surface on there. It also lays out, because of the nature of the units we're building and our experience in the market, the 40-foot deep setback generally would have you then park cars in tandem to each other. We built Wellington Village, if you're familiar with that, over by Landis Market. That has that. And what you end up with is, if you're the first person home, but you have to leave first in the morning, you have jockeying of cars that occurs. That's not what at least our buyers have said they want, and doesn't really work well. So we prefer to side by side stack them this way. That seems to work the best for what the consumer is looking for. So we're basically asking for a 10-foot reduction, which would then allow, at the worst case scenario, which would be these units that are closest here and here and here, you would have 25 feet to the right-of-way line and 27 feet to the sidewalk. What we've shown here is a typical passenger car on the one side, Honda Accord, Toyota Camry, something of that nature, and then the other side is a large SUV, Chevy Tahoe style vehicle, to show how they would park there. They do not have to be up against the garage door, and they're not hanging over on the sidewalk where it comes down to it. As most of you know, your typical parking lot parking space is 10 foot wide by 20 foot deep. So these would be anywhere from 7 to 9 feet deeper than your typical parking lot parking space with regards to that. So that situation is the same here. And so two of the variances we're asking for are related to this. The ordinance both has a setback for the building of 40 feet, and it has a distance from the garage to the right-of-way line, 35 feet, has a distance to the garage from the right-of-way line of 35 feet. So we asked for a variance for both of those because they run concurrent. On the twins, which is the next sheet, we are dealing with the same situation. However, the twins require a 40-foot setback rather than a 35-foot setback. But I've done an exhibit that meets the same standards as what we talked about for the townhomes within regards to that. And then the final variance we're asking for, and
I'm sorry.
Go back.
It's there with the parking.
Yes.
You've got a typical car and a typical van, and 18 feet.
Yeah.
It seems like you've got about 6 inches between the vehicles. Can you tell me how they all fit in 18 feet? Because a typical van is going to be about 8 or 9 feet wide, right?
Right.
And
And I mean, that is a standard driveway dimension that we build throughout our developments, and they fit well, and you can drive through. We've built developments similar to this over in Salford Township called Country View on Ridge Road. The driveways are like that, or we have a site over in Sellersville called Caroline Hill, similar driveway dimension, and that works and does not tend to be a problem.
All right.
What is the width of the driveway?
18 feet.
18.
Yeah. And then the final request,
So what are they asking for? A reduction of the 40 feet?
Gee, if you can, I guess the best exhibit for this would be, go back one for me just for a minute. Okay. Actually, go one more back, and we'll work off of that. The townhomes. The ordinance requires minimum lot sizes within your townhomes, twins, and single-family homes. On townhome, or on twins and on single-family homes, okay, fine, you have a minimum lot size, so you have a minimum width at the building line, and a minimum, that then shows how big the building envelope is gonna be. Within that, you can then build a house that will fit within that building envelope. It doesn't really dictate what size unit you end up building there. On a single-family home, the same thing. I mean, you have some restrictions because of the building envelope size, but it doesn't restrict you beyond that from an architectural standpoint. When you get to townhomes and you have a minimum lot size, the end units follow suit with the twins. I could put a 24-foot wide lot, but I could end up with a 22-foot wide unit because I can make it smaller or bigger as I choose. The problem comes down to is on interior units. Whatever the minimum lot size is, that then dictates the minimum unit size within that. Stands to reason. We would like to reduce the minimum lot size of the interior units only to 22 feet wide from 24 feet wide, okay? And Judy, now I'm going to ask you to go to the very last slide, and I'll explain the type of unit we want to build for the townhomes and why that unit works well and some benefits of it. This is the unit that we did build at Country View at Salford, and is the unit we're currently building at Caroline Hill in Sellersville. This meets your other requirements, height-wise, et cetera, in the ordinance. This allows us, on your typical 24-foot wide unit, okay, you often see those as two-story units, and the garage sticks out front, and all the living spaces to the rear, and then you have a second floor on this. This is a 22-foot wide unit that mirrors basically the same square footage as those standard 24-foot wide by 50-foot deep townhomes, similar to what we built at Wellington. That was between 1,800 and 1,900 square feet in living space, okay? This accomplishes the same living space in a 22-foot wide by 38-foot deep envelope. So we shrink up the envelope, but we go higher. And in doing that, we also allocate space for a two-car garage. So that in a development like this, if you have a one-car garage, most people don't end up using that one-car garage because they have trash cans, bikes, things all on that line. What we've seen in here is, with the two spaces in the front yard, and then the garage that we have, you usually don't see two cars in that garage, but you're gonna get one car in the garage, and then there's space for storage, which I think everybody finds important. The other thing that's nice about it, and I wanted to show the floor plan of these, which is at the bottom down here, the primary living space is on this second level here. And what that does, in most townhomes, if you're on a two-story townhome, light is a problem on the first floor because the garage takes up a good portion of the front of the building. And in that case, all you're getting is light from the rear, particularly on interior units. With this layout, you have what would be considered a rec room or a bonus room to the rear of the garage on the first floor, and they have sliders and windows in the back. On the second floor, where the main living space is, you have a whole wall of windows in the front, plus a wall of windows to the rear. So you've got natural light from the front to back, and since we build this with all truss construction, there's no load-bearing walls blocking that sight line between the two. So you have better living space in these units because of that. Then the third floor ends up being very similar to any of the townhomes, with 2 bedrooms in the front, a master suite to the rear. It has 2 full baths on that floor. There's a powder room on the second floor. So as I said, that's basically a 1,900 square foot unit. It's a better layout. Our market demographics show that that is the type of layout also that the buyers of these units, typically early on in their lifespan of buying units, first-time home buyers or single people, etc., this is sort of the standard that they're looking for when it comes down to it. So I think that the issue with the lot width versus unit width in your ordinance, and I see that in a lot of ordinances that are of that era. I think just the marketplace and the products that are being built by builders have changed since some of those ordinances have been adopted, and we're asking for some relief just for those interior units. They said we don't need them on the end. We can still meet a 24-foot wide unit lot, but put a smaller unit on those. So those are the 4 items of relief we're looking for, and I'll just summarize them briefly for you. The first is an adjustment on the unit mix so we can have 2 more townhomes and 2 less singles than would have been required in the plan. Second is basically tied together townhomes and twins. We're moving the units from 35 feet to 25 feet from the right-of-way line, or 40 feet to 25 feet from the right-of-way line, as the twins may be. And the final one would be a reduction in lot width for the townhome units on the interior units only. And as you know, this is an application to the zoning hearing board, and this is for information purposes for the board, for you to ask questions, for you to send along your opinion, to send along your solicitor, whatever you choose to do with that application. I would just like to get that feedback, and then we move on to the zoning hearing board at that point. And I'm happy to answer all the questions that may come.
Okay, the pictures that you have here, those are 22-foot wide
They are
units?
22-foot wide units.
And that's what you're proposing versus 24?
That is what we're proposing for the townhomes.
In the internal units only?
And the end units would also be, all the townhomes would be 22-foot
Oh, okay.
wide, but the end unit doesn't need the relief because it's not attached to anything on the one side.
And the end units have the door coming in the side? And
Yes, they do.
But I don't see where the stairs go up on the internal
Oh.
units. Maybe I'm just...
You see where the
picturing it.
doorway is right here?
I do, but I don't see anything in the floor plan here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
See these, okay. When you walk into the unit, I'm sorry, this happens to be the end unit. That's
Right,
why
exactly,
it's showing that way.
yeah.
On the interior unit, this garage is smaller than that, so it's not a 22-foot wide
Right,
garage.
yeah.
And then you have a hallway that walks back to that stairwell. And there's a set of
Back to the
stairs
stairwell,
that
okay.
come up to meet the stairwell at the landing right here.
Okay. All right.
The twins would be a two-story, 24-foot wide, wider unit, and that works because they're all end units theoretically,
Yeah.
and there's light on multiple sides.
Right.
And then, as we said, the single-family homes basically end up with a 40 to 43-foot wide house that can end up being about 50-foot deep, which equates to a 27 to 2,800 square foot single-family house. The twins end up being about 22 to 2,300 square feet. So that also allows us to, as you're selling multiple units in one job, you need to have price point differential and to have product differential between the towns, the twins, and the singles as you work through it. And this type of mix would allow us to then move the project through, I think, successfully rather than lingering.
Is this just a typical representation, or is this, what you're showing us here is what you perceive the design will be?
That is just as a representation of exactly what we offer over at Caroline Hill right now. Each time we do a project, we tend to change facades, we tend to, find out what's worked, what hasn't worked. Based on price point, we may add, one of the things we're looking at now, the Craftsman style is becoming more popular. The brick is sort of, maybe going out of style. So you may see changes in the general facade on the front. But what you'll always see is a certain amount of masonry. You always see a certain amount of breaks in the units so that it's not one flat facade across there like a barrack style. You always see a certain amount of roof breaks on the units, just as we have here, so that they have a certain amount of style instead of just being a flat rectangular box.
Does this also represent what you all have built and sold in Tylersport?
It does, yes.
So this is a picture of that?
This is actually a rendering that we're currently using for our Caroline Hill sales. This is the difference here, as you go through that site, many of the front doors were actually on the front of the end units. That was a modification we made when we moved over to Caroline, which makes the garage bigger and actually a nicer floor plan by having the doors come in the side on those end units. So each project we work off of something, but we try to modify it to improve it.
What's the name of the development in Tylersport?
Country View at Salford,
Thank you.
which is just past Allentown Road on Ridge Road. And that was 139 townhomes and 50 singles that was on that site.
Chris, one of the major concerns that I have that you were asking for relief on is the distance between the garage and the sidewalks.
Okay, can we go back to that exhibit, Hugh, so we can talk off of that? That's fine, yep.
Yes, and what I've seen driving around in the past is vehicles parked out into the sidewalk because kids have their bikes and stuff up against the garage, and someone has a Suburban or a
Pickup truck?
double cab pickup truck with an 8-foot bed and a trailer hitch on it. Okay, you're talking 22 feet for a truck that size, and then you put a trailer hitch on it, it's sticking out. Now, you only have 25 feet there.
Well, we actually, and that's why I wanted to point out, it'll be 25 feet to the setback line, and then you have another 2 feet to the sidewalk when it comes out. In the worst case scenario,
Right.
which is the closest unit, and then you have units that are 29 feet, so.
And the concern that I had was, kids always have stuff in front of the garage.
Right,
9 times out of 10. And I've experienced seeing vehicles out into the sidewalk. That's one of the issues that I see here, that could be a potential issue, problem.
and I can appreciate that. As I said, we've built a lot of these, and this dimension seems to work without being too tight when it comes down to it. I agree, 25 feet at a minimum. In some cases, I've seen somewhere it's only 20 feet from the garage door to the sidewalk. That, that's real tight. 25 feet's getting close to it. We've tried to allocate more than that with what we're requesting here, because that becomes a problem for us, because with 99 units, the first people move in, and we're still there to hear everything that's a problem when they're through it, and we try to not allow that to be the case when it comes down to it.
The one thing that comes to my mind here on that is you're putting these townhouses down at the bottom, so everybody that lives up
Midway, we're midway on the townhomes.
But people that walk and stuff, even the people that live up in the single family homes, they gotta walk on the sidewalk, which is only a 4-foot sidewalk.
Right, and if you go back to the site plan for a minute, we can talk about that for a minute. What we've tried, you do have, this would be the one area, like for a through group, you'd have the towns in this area, and then, the twins on that side, so that would be where these people walking down, you'd think they might block them, is what the concern would be.
Right, and with being only a 4-foot sidewalk, most sidewalks, I think, aren't they 5 foot?
No, they're 4 foot, but
Our
we talked
ordinance
about
requires a
that.
4-foot sidewalk.
4 foot, okay. But
Right,
being able to pass, without having to go out into the road.
Right, well, I think, and I don't wanna argue too long, the one benefit you have, at least typically, say a trailer hitch did happen to approach into the sidewalk on the worst case example of the dually with the long bed and a hitch on the back of it. That also then ends up being in a situation where you have a driveway apron next to it, not a grass strip and not the road. You have a 5-foot apron, curb and apron, that if you do need to go around an encroachment, which can happen sometimes, there is a relief to that in those particular areas because the apron would run the width of the driveway also.
Okay.
So you're not pushing people into the street, you're not pushing baby carriages into the street that way, because the sidewalk is not set against the curb either. It's set behind the grass strip, which gives you that 4 to 5 feet based on how you measure from the inside or outside of the curb.
Okay.
And again, I mean, I mentioned the amount of impervious. I mean, the amount of impervious that this relief gets you reduces the impervious on the site by 18,000 square feet. That may not seem like a lot, but having worked on your stormwater ordinance with Steve and understanding what we have to do with the MPDS permits that we have to get, the one thing they're always encouraging us, and basically they ask specifically on the permit application, what have you done to reduce impervious surfaces on this site? And these are areas where we find, I mean, they push for road reductions, you know, they push for, and we think this is a good area to reduce impervious without looking at road width reductions, sidewalk reduction, things along that line. I will also note, and I know that, you know, people say, well, you can always reduce units. I understand that also. This site, based on your current ordinance, could bear 137 units. That you're 5.6 units to the acre, which is what the ordinance allows. That's the max density on this. But due to site constraints, due to our choice of layout, you know, if we didn't want to do singles and we chose one of your other choices in there, multiplexes or something like that, we could have a greater number of units on here. We think this type of unit mix works the best for the marketplace we're in, and based on the site constraints we have with slopes and woodlands that we want to preserve and things along that line. So I did want to throw that out as a discussion item.
Thank you.
Chris, what are you talking in terms of roadway width there?
We are doing in the area down, let me just make sure I state this, because we have proposed to do a full width and then choke it down 30, Justin, your eyes, anybody in mind? 32 feet for the main access road up to here, and then when we get up to here, which limited access, we proposed to go down to 28 feet. So that would be.
Is there any parking on any side?
Yeah, there would be parking on one side of the street, which would basically be on the twin side is what we've proposed in this area. And then where there's breaks between parking areas, we've provided parking. And then we also have shown there's perpendicular parking spaces in this area, all along here, and along here. Primarily, we thought that the on-street parking would best serve up in the town, in the singles, because of the breaks between the driveways, and then we introduced the perpendicular in the areas where you don't have as many breaks between driveways.
What kind of setback do you have on the single family?
The single-family home meets your ordinance requirement, and that requirement for setback is 40 feet from the right-of-way line.
So with that, you have the capability, they have the capability to get 4 vehicles. Right?
Correct. Because they'd basically be about 42 to 44 feet back, depending on where they sit in the envelope.
Which would seem to lead to
And they'd have 2-car garages.
not having on-street parking.
I think the on-street parking in that area was really primarily more of guest parking, not meant to be for homeowners. And typically, we write into our homeowners association documents, we provide sufficient parking at your unit. So any overflow parking, whether it happens to be in the singles or even down in this area where we have the overflow, that overflow is for guest parking, not for resident parking, and
Full-time parking.
that's enforced by the homeowners association.
I mean, just a quick overview, that I think on-street parking, I don't think is very conducive to having a good-looking community, quite frankly. It turns out to be cluttered with all kind of vehicles, and I think
We
obviously
can reduce
one
the
of
road width then?
Beg pardon?
We can reduce the road width then?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Particularly down the road if there were some consideration of the township taking it on. And that's an issue as well. But I think the off-street parking is a much
Well,
better way to go.
And I think in this area, the 28 feet would be parking on only one side. You restrict it to one side because of the width of the road. And as I said, it wouldn't be marked, it wouldn't be striped, it would just be, you know, as people do anywhere they drive in a, you know, with a single-family home, if you have a guest, they're gonna park in front of the curb area there.
Greg, Jim, Jay, you get any more questions?
I don't have any more questions.
I don't have any more.
Well, at this point then, we'll open it up to our friends and neighbors that came to tell us what they think. So if we can have lights, some of the lights anyway. And I urge again, if you have comments to, we're gonna try to keep the maximum 3 to 5 minutes. And if you're gonna say what's already been duplicated, it might pay to just make that kind of statement that I agree with so-and-so, or I disagree, or whatever it might be. So at this point, I'll open it up to the floor, and we'll try to do this in orderly fashion as possible. So who'd like to be the guinea pig?
I'll be the guinea pig.
Okay, Mr. Rambo.
Bob Rambo, Simmons Road. Chris, you mentioned that you applied for an arsenic rebatement program with the state.
Yes,
You have or Univest has?
I have,
You have.
just for our site, as the equitable owner.
Okay.
Now, we haven't applied, technically, we've gone through and done the studies, and we've done our notice of intent to remediate, which the township has received notice of, and we are wrapping up the documentation that will go into DEP.
Okay. Does that program allow release you of any liability?
Yes, it does. And any future homeowner, any previous, current, or future property owner, once you have met the standards that you put, that are accepted by DEP in your Act 2 final report, that then relieves the liability in the string of custody on the property.
Okay. But you have not received approval yet?
We have not received approval yet, no.
Okay, very good. Second question, you were showing how you're gonna build this wall or fence along the quarry wall, okay? But yet the fence is gonna be open under the power line because of ordinances,
Correct.
okay? Well, that doesn't make any sense to have a fence and then no fence. Okay, so all the mice are gonna run through the opening, okay? And then you're talking about an easement right back to Quarry Road,
Mm-hmm.
okay? Are you gonna put a fence there?
We would put a gate there.
You put a gate to
Yeah.
let people in the quarry.
What'd you say?
You were gonna put a gate to let people in the quarry?
No, a gate that would be secured, so it could still be used for emergency purposes, but not to generally
No,
permit
I'm
flow.
not talking
Oh,
about.
I'm sorry.
I'm not talking about that portion of the fence. I'm talking about the perpendicular portion.
Right.
How is that gonna be protected?
That,
Is that not your problem?
that is, there is a large berm on that side of the quarry at this point, so there
So
is
the kids
a,
can go up and go over the berm.
they-
Okay, so they can go over the berm, or they
Right.
can go through the opening in the fence.
Or over the fence.
Okay?
we're over there.
And you're released of liability.
Well, no, we're arsenic.
Arsenic liability.
Yes.
Okay? But you're not released of liability, you build a home next to an abandoned quarry, and God forbid some kid falls in it. You're not released from that liability, I guess, are you?
Nor is the homeowner or the parent or anybody else who would be part of that.
Do you really think it's a good idea to build homes, 99 homes, next to an abandoned quarry? Do you really, I mean, Bill Bonenberger's a good guy. This doesn't seem like Bill Bonenberger to me. This plan is just full of holes. Steve Balla, when he wrote his report, 28 items with some subsections in those items, challenging a cursory review of this proposed building. That's a lot. I've seen a lot of building plans. That's a lot on a cursory review. I think you basically took a plan here, threw it against the wall to see what's gonna stick. It's a bad plan, quite frankly. It's a bad plan. The children, the future children of that property are at risk. You're putting them at risk, and that's wrong. That's fundamentally wrong. And when you remove arsenic, to back up a little bit, how do you remove that? You remove the soil, but you have to keep the soil on the property, correct?
No, we're not, the way we approach this is because of the nature of the arsenic that we've encountered on the property, we're able to do what's known as a risk mitigation study. And the risk mitigation study determines what the appropriate level of arsenic on the property is, different than what the statewide health standard is.
Okay, sure, go ahead.
I'm Dr. Ramirez, and besides being a doctor.
Excuse me, name please, name and
I'm
address.
Dr. Ramirez, Ephraim Ramirez, Cathill Road, around the corner from them.
Okay, did you get that, Judy?
Besides being a doctor, my bachelor's degree is in environmental chemistry. And what you're proposing is dumping iron hydroxide into the landfill and mix it in, and that's how you collect arsenic from the ground. that is carcinogenic. So you're gonna replace arsenic with a carcinogenic?
No, I'm not sure I followed exactly what you said, but that didn't sound like anything that we were doing.
You know, I've done this. This is not new for me. Anoxious contamination is a common thing in my country, from Puerto Rico. We have mines and all kinds of stuff. And a noxious environment needs dilution or entrapment. And iron hydroxide is what most companies uses to mitigate this kind of situation, and you're gonna enhance the problem instead of mitigating it.
All I can say is, we are not doing that, okay? That is not being mixed, nothing is being mixed into the arsenic in order to do that, so that is entirely
So
different.
how you
I'd be
plan
happy
to do
to
this?
bring our professional consultant in to have that discussion
That
with
would
you
be
on
very
that.
interesting.
So, I'd be happy to do that.
The other thing about this plan, if I could finish, thank you, Doc. Again, this is just a bad plan, but you put a tot lock right next to the high tension lines, the power lines. Come on. Now, and you're gonna probably stand there and tell me that, oh, there's no electrical interference come on, this is just a bad plan. I really think you should go back and come up with something else. It's just.
I appreciate your feedback, Bob.
And the other thing is, you're building cliff homes, because if that quarry has to be reclaimed to a 30-degree angle, you're onto that property of yours. And I just don't understand how this township could even consider building on this property until this quarry mess is straightened out. That's the biggest issue, quite frankly. What you've done, the good thing you've done here tonight, is bring this to surface,
Right.
so that this quarry can get fixed.
Let me ask you this
quarry is
question,
a
Bob.
mess.
If the quarry were mitigated per the plan, would you have as much opposition to
Per
what we're
what?
proposing? Per what the reclamation plan is, which is to cut back the slopes.
I have to see that, not see houses hanging over it, and not seeing a kid, the potential of a child or some teenagers falling into that cliff.
Okay.
If you go to East Rock Hill, they have problems. You can ask the chief here. Chief, do they have problems in East Rock Hill at the quarry?
We have problems.
Yeah. Do they have problems at other abandoned quarries?
Yes.
We have been tortured, quite frankly, by M&M Stone Quarry and now Univest, the bank. And the bank should step up and be the good community bank that says it is, and fix this quarry. It's whether they forced M&M into bankruptcy or not, this is their problem. They need to fix it, they need to fix it now. Thank God we have not had an accident. This is a bomb waiting to go off. Gentlemen of the board, this needs to be fixed. Chris, thanks for bringing this to light.
I appreciate your feedback,
Thank
Bob.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's incumbent on all of us to retrofit that quarry. And that obviously at this point, right now involves the organization has under agreement and Union National. As I see it, WB can help to be a facilitator in making that happen. Because that's the real issue. I mean, if the quarry wasn't there, building this property is in line with the ordinance we have. That area was zoned to be suburban residential. We purposely have, in the community, tried to maintain the suburban residential environment south of the Perkiomen Creek. And north of that, if you look at what we've done, we've created a wide swath of conserved land from county line almost certainly over to Simmons Road, which kind of blocks that out. And any other kind of development would be done up here, and there's not a lot of suburban residential activity opportunities north of the ridge.
Don, I understand what you're saying, and thanks for planning and so forth, but I'll use Chris's words. There's an 800-pound gorilla in this room. It's on that screen. And until that 800-pound gorilla is sent back and fixed, we shouldn't be talking about building, a single home. We should be talking about putting a fence around that quarry now with a security system to stop this. This is just, again, Chris, thanks for bringing this to light. This boil on West Rockhill needs to be fixed, and should be fixed by Univest Bank, who owns it.
Yeah, and quite frankly, I mean, it's one doesn't necessarily, well, one does precede the other, but that doesn't preclude someone, the likes of WB or whoever it might be, in developing property.
Don, I don't
So-
disagree, but we got the 800-pound gorilla. So
Right.
if WB were sitting here and showing this, you know, I would be concerned, I would come up here and have a conversation. But I'm really adamant about this. This is a real issue. This is a moral issue, an ethical issue. That quarry needs to be reclaimed. And if it's DEP, we gotta get people, we have a doctor here who's environmental, we have other people in this community that can probably help this board pull together and get this quarry fixed so Chris can build a development.
Well,
I would like to see something happen positive to that land, but we gotta take care of the quarry first. That's the problem, Chris.
Yeah, and
Sorry.
I don't,
And I do hear, I mean, I hear that.
nobody disagrees with that, Bob, but there is a process we'll go through. As I said at the beginning, this process that Chris has brought here, it's an idea they have, it's an opportunity, and this is very early stages. And this is quite frankly the first that we've really seen much of the detail in this. And it's a sketch plan that we have, so it's not, there's nothing finalized or anything. But the issue is, not only WB, not only West Rockhill, not only the community, and Univest and M&M have got to fix that. The bottom line, the fix to that is in the hands of the DEP. Somebody's gonna have to pay for it, but DEP is gonna control that. And unfortunately, we all know that that doesn't happen overnight with any government agency.
Well,
And
then,
so,
Don, then let me ask you a question. What is the township doing? What is the township doing about getting involved with the DEP? Okay, because what you just said to me, quite frankly, is you're dumping it in their lap.
no,
And they're gonna
it's-
tell you what to do.
that's what the law
I think it's
says.
the wrong way around. I think the community, and thank you, Greg, for filing the application, and Grimbean and Thatcher, you did file that application so that there will be public involvement. I would like to see the township be made aware of it, and a committee, a quarry committee, of residents of this township be involved in that public discussion with the DEP. We
Right.
just can't have the DEP tell us what to do. They work for us. They work for us.
I hear you, you're right. But I'm just telling you what reality is, and the reality is that all the parties that you've mentioned, including WP and Union National and M&M and DEP, they all gotta be involved in getting this. This has now been presented as an opportunity for a developer to develop that land. So there are many things that get involved in that, and we're very early in this ballgame. And we have had some brief conversation with Union National. They've not responded back completely yet, and we need to get with them. We need to have the owner of the whole property, as well as Union National, and DEP and everybody involved in wrestling this to the ground. It's not something that we can just, push a button and it's gonna happen, unfortunately, because of the legal complications involved here. And I think council can comment on that if they so choose. But this is not a next year project.
Don, I understand it's not a next year project. The problem is here, this should have been a 30-year ago project to put a fence around that quarry. That's the issue that I have. Again, Chris, you're the victim here in a sense, okay? Again, thanks for.
I'm a developer, I can't say about
Thanks
that.
for-
We're all,
Don,
wait
can I
a
say
minute,
something?
wait a minute, one at a time.
It's fine.
We gotta move on. You're over your time limit.
5,
Yeah, let me just finish this up. We need to get security around the abandoned quarry. Thank you.
okay, thank you. Now, somebody back here had their hand. Yes, sir.
Don, I'm Anthony on Clymer Avenue, and,
Your last name, sir? Can you
Bogan,
stand
I'm
up?
sorry. Oh, you want me to stand up?
Please.
I'm not, I mean, aside from the issue of building the houses, I don't want 200 extra cars on my road. That Clymer Avenue, Quarry Road, they can't handle it. I mean, it's crazy. And then next thing you know, what's gonna happen, we're gonna have red lights at Meeting House Road, at Quarry Road, and that development that you're talking about up on Allentown Road, that traffic comes down Cathill to get on the bypass. From Ridge Road, they come down County Line, cutting Cathill and through. I see it every morning. And I mean, if you got 100 houses, 2 cars, I mean, and then if there's a child that drives or what have you, I mean, at minimum, it's 200 cars. And then my other issue is the fact that, I've seen it too many times where they put developments in, now we have that many more kids going to school, and then, our school taxes are reasonable. I mean, the taxes for the township are reasonable. And, and the police department gives the township a very good price, and the whole thing just snowballs. I mean, you know, if they're dedicated roads and the township wants to plow them, I mean, a cul-de-sac is the worst thing to plow. And, you know, and then